it become, well, I've got this much, I could have this much. How hard people tried to save the ancient arcane messages that are buried with language. Is what it is in their time. The Vatican comes stomp you out. Right. Literally come stomp you out. So, that's the whole, people get so, if it's a cult, they think it's bad because of the way we've been trained. And what that means is it's hidden. In other words, most occult things would probably be helpful to you. Not all. You don't want to cross the dark side of the fence, or at least I don't. I don't need to try to get that crap out of my mind. Right. But like tarot cards is a perfect example. Now, I did an episode. Here's how tapped into the world mind we have been at times. We ran an episode on Notre Dame, the cathedral, where I was saying they're taking these things apart, they're removing things, so this path for a higher human in glass and stone is going to get lost. 2 weeks later, they burned Notre Dame. Wow. But what people don't know is the Catholic Church claims they built that. They didn't frickin' build that. They don't even know who the architect is. These other geniuses built it, and the claim from the Hermetics people is that the people who built it were skilled craftsmen who were so well off in the 13 and 1400s, they only had to work eight weeks a year, and that was all donated time to build that. But tarot cards, that's exactly why we have tarot cards. At the time, they printed, I think, in 4 colors. Every line, every color, every image is saving arcane information that basically Pope Johnny Joe Blowhard wanted to stomp out. So that's why they did it. Yeah, and I also think comedy is a way to hide in plain sight, as they say. Like, one of my first jokes I did when I was like 18 or 19 at college, I was doing sets in college, was my joke was, I was an altar boy. They told me to wear a dress, light a candle, and drink some wine. I should have known I was on a date. And it's like Catholics could laugh, and it's just, I could transmit information without triggering the how dare you response. And here's something interesting to think about. My mom went to like a Jesuit master's program, and her and my dad were very involved in the Benedictine monastery, and my quote-unquote godfather is like a monk, but he introduced me to tarot cards when I was a kid. And I think one thing people might not understand is a lot of these monasteries and places, they're full of just like learned, not always, I mean, a lot of them are crazy, but a lot of them are like just like learned, interested people that like to think and study, and it's not, it can be as close-minded as you want it to be, or as great as you want it to be, depending a lot of times on who's the abbot and how tyrannical they are. But I remember growing up, we did tarot cards because it was about like more like history, and it wasn't this like evil thing. And this is with a monk, like someone who's vowed celibacy and poverty and all that. And so I had a different insight into Christianity growing up, and it still gets me in trouble from what we call the churchians. But my mom didn't believe in original sin. She thought Augustine was wrong, and so my baptism she called the entrance into Christian community, because she said I was born, that a human baby is born perfect. And so, that's how I was raised. And so I still can run into that problem because my parents raised me. Our Christianity was more of a freeing thing and more of like a beautiful thing versus like the how dare you Christianity that we now see in science and in government and in all these institutions. And it really infects people, when they start getting like that, So you said a couple things. By the way, comedy used to be, not so much anymore, the perfect place to go talk about things that matter. Look at Archie Bunker as an example of that. You couldn't fly with that for a moment now, but we better do our due diligence with the tarot cards, because we talk about these things and people get interested, and I don't want to steer people down the wrong path. As I told you about Notre Dame, and if you go to France, that's where I always try to go for all the old Hermetic stuff, because it got preserved there very well. It was part of everything in the upper crust for a very long time before the Vatican started stomping everybody out. So the tarot deck that I would recommend if people want to take an interest is the Marseille deck. Now, you should understand there's a Jewish dude who redid the Marseille deck, who's the first person to put the tarot into the Jewish language, which it's a decent deck. But for me, I want original. So I forget, it's like CBD or something, Marseille. That's not the original. You want Marseille. And that's a city in France, if people don't know what Marseille is. The other thing is, there is a book that the author, Michael Hoffman, who co-wrote King Kill 33 with James Shelby Downard, sent me. It's called Meditations on the Tarot. And if you're big on Christianity and you want to learn, I can't think of a better book that's not the Bible to get you into the right vein to understand the wool that's been pulled over your eyes. It's even got bishops in the foreword telling you why this matters, but it will open your eyes to, first, what you don't know about Scripture, and secondarily, how hard people tried to save the ancient arcane messages that are buried with language or omission. Anyhow, there it is, the Marseille deck.
Yeah, and what evil is, you can spot. Once you start seeing the algorithm, you can spot it a mile away. It's like,
yes,
to look at, it's when someone uses that deck for an agenda, for deception, for personal gain.
I can address that. I can address that. So most people have seen James Bond and they're familiar with a totally different tarot deck. It's called Rider or Rider Waite or something like that. This is the one you see in Live and Let Die. This is inverted. That deck is inverted. They added the word death to a card which never had the word death, and they added a 0 to a card that had no number. Right. In my view, the Fool, which means something different than you think, is the traveler. It's me and you.
Yeah,
we are
exactly,
the Fool.
Exactly.
And so from the arcane cards, the 22 arcana, major arcana, not the numbered cards, are the path of a human being. And it starts with the magician, but to me, that Fool is the traveler that goes all the way through to the end. Now, what they did, the Rider-Waite deck, and they were associated with Crowley, they inverted the whole thing. They gave it a 0. They made the Fool the last card. They added the death idea because everybody knows institutions got to get their death. So just know, man, that's why I'm pointing out the Marseille deck. I did my due diligence, and I'm not down with the Rider or Rider-Waite decks.
Yeah, and also like the how dare you people would be like, oh, how dare you? I'm like, well, what card deck do you use? It's like, oh, the 52 cards that I gamble with. I'm like, what do you think that one-eyed Jack means?
What do you think the whole deck means? The whole deck at its root is an allegory for the year.
Right,
That's
52.
why there's 4 seats, 4 suits, 4 seats. Yeah. It's all based. That deck that we play cards with is based on the tarot if you go back.
100%. You got the 4 seasons, the 52 weeks, the one-eyed Jack. That's why I really liked, was it Hoffman who told you about like, what did he say about 2021 being the blackjack year?
Blackjack.
Yeah, that really resonated with me, how 2020 vision, then blackjack. And I was telling my guys about that, where I was like, this is the year of the blackjack. Are you going to be the house, or are you going to be the one who loses,
Well, let's address that for a minute. When he wrote me a simple email, by the way, he's getting ready to release his sequel, and he's promised he'll come on Crow 777 Radio first. And he's the older generation, but I don't think we can thank those men. Without the Downard work and his co-authoring, we wouldn't know things that we know based on King Kill 33 and other writings. But to get back to the point, there are no evil numbers. And so this is all about us. We're the apex thing here. This place exists for us, basically. Life in general, but we are the apex caretakers. Yeah. Now, if you take 1 through a 9, which is the only numbers we have, you can use that 0 that doesn't exist in nature. It's a placeholder. And you could say 10, which is the idea of perfection. And by the way, in the book, Meditations on the Tarot, you'll begin to learn something about numbers from a biblical standpoint to prove that it was used there as well. But all those numbers are in what's called the decan. So the decan means 10, right? If you remove numbers from the decan and then put human intention on it, there can be evil numbers because human intention can do bad things. The 2 that stand out might surprise you. That would be 2 and 5. When pulled from the decan with human intention, those are often used for what we would consider bad or evil ends. And now, knowing what I just told you, why did all those 11s show up? There's so many reasons, but there's a positive side to 11. You're just getting shown the dirt, mud side by the kind of dark minds that are doing all the stuff we don't care for in the world right now. What is 11? Well, it's 1 and 1. That's 2, right? And it's also the sign of the zodiac we're going into. The 11th sign is Aquarius. It goes on and on and on, these usages. But people should understand, just because we know the news will show us the dark side of the coin every time, we get to use numbers too. Now, you just said Hoffman said blackjack. I knew what he meant. One of the versions of 21 is 3 sevens. So someone could say to me, Crow, why are you being... No. 7 is the perfect number. It is godly. It is so many things I could say, and every time you add another 7, it's like adding an octave to music.
Yeah.
I use the positive side. I have no dark intent in me ever. You will never see me use a number with negative human intent on it, because I understand these are all numbers for all of us. It's just that the sources that run this place, they use the black side almost always.
Yeah, I was impressed that you took a stand against crypto. I also have as well. It was very tempting to engage in the Greek. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't easy for me because I have all these people that want to send me crypto, and I could see the bubble rising after I was wrong before. I thought it would peak out at 10,000. Then as I saw it ramping up, I was like, oh, I might as well ride this wave. But like an instinct in me deep down said, the words have meaning: crypt, blockchain, and how it is another level away from our reality that easily can be implemented for global slavery. And I just couldn't get into it. And to hear you also take that stand, I really appreciated that, because there's not a lot of us, man. Most people dove right into that shallow end, and I'm glad that you also don't like crypto.
What's the root of crypto? It's binary. There's your 2 pulled from the Decan. And by the way, it's even worse than that, because binary is not run with 1 and 2. It's 1 and 0. And 0 doesn't exist in nature.
Yeah.
So at the root of crypto, it's that 2 pulled from the Decan, and it's fugazi. It's counterfeit. It has no place in nature. And the problem in our world right now is they have broke so many people, are just poor as they've ever been. And so I took the stand for the simple reason, yeah, man, you could get involved in crypto. If you're clever, you might make some money if you know when to get out. But at the end of the day, let's say you make 5-10 grand. Heck, let's say you make 20 grand. 15 years or 20 years from now, when you look back at the 20 grand you once made, would you rather have made that 20 grand and not taken that money and contributed to the wholesale slavery of the human race, or not taken the 20 grand and have a clear conscience and understand that your deeds stood true?
Yeah, I compare it to when women left the homes, where it's like, at the time I can see the appeal where you can get an edge up over the Joneses, where it's like, now with 2 incomes we can have a big boat, and it's like, okay, so now you're devaluing the labor. And so looking now, who's raising the kids? Right. You got screens, you got this rise in this psychopathic behavior. And it's like, looking back, was it worth it? Was it worth it to give up a mother for stuff? And of course the answer is no. And that's why I'm trying to push more of a sense of empowered poverty, where not poverty, because poverty usually feels like being under someone's boot, but the type of living where you have a garden, you have friends, you have an ability to trade, you have a skill, you can hunt, you can do a lot of, you can make your own stuff. And on paper that looks like poverty. There's a lot of people that say, oh, half the world lives on $1 a day. I'm like, I want to know what kind of currencies they have. And I want us to start building those currencies so that we aren't as controllable by the central banks. And so, that's how I see the way out. I talked to you about Bertaria when I did your show, and how we've developed these, and it's just kept going since I talked to you. Now we have our own social media with 9,000 subscribers. We have our own maps with our own layout, thousands of homesteads and small businesses and families, homeschooling, The app doesn't have anything to do with politics or waking people up or anything like that. It's only advice on gardening, advice on all this stuff. And you can see that that's the real battery. You can fuel your own battery with your own community, and that's the only way through. Other than that, you're playing this 1 and 0 false binary game where it's like, are you a 0 or are you a 1? It's like, bitch, I'm a 3, I'm an 8, I'm a 10. It's like, I'm not going to play, I'm not going to take their bait,
No, and I'll be honest with you. I've been freaking impressed with what you have done and how you steered away from where you came, where having a lot of money is commonplace where you were. Eventually, you would have been in a Bel Air mansion or something. But you see, money can't buy you love. And when you don't have money, it's the only thing that matters. I know. Because when I was doing my scope work, I didn't even know how I was going to pay my rent. Literally did not know how I was going to pay my rent. When you have money, the trap is to let it become, well, I've got this much, I could have this much. What I do is I've got everything covered that I need. Now, if I bump someone who needs help, I do it instantly. We had a guest on a short while ago whose wife is battling cancer, and they tried to get one of those Violet Ray Tesla devices, couldn't afford it. So Crow 777 Radio got on the frickin' horn the moment I heard it and worked out a deal, and someone else who'd been on our show gave me a break on the price. We covered it. We got it over to them. And the first email I got back was that the pain relief was better than the drugs they had her on.
Amazing.
The point is if you've got it and you're not helping others, that kind of is a measurable sin.
Yep.
Because what you're doing is you're seeing someone you could help, and consciously or subconsciously, you're not helping. And this undermines the central banking idea. When I see someone I can help, I damn well do it. And so others do this. And what that does is it lessens the control, because the control is I can force these people to need and not have anything.
I love that, man, because that's what happened to me. I went through about a year where I was a little resentful of a group we'll just call the Jays. And then I started realizing that a lot of the resentment I had was stuff that I could implement in our community and that I shouldn't, in-group preference, like what you just described. You have a tribe, you have a community, and you help each other out. And so from the outside, that can be frustrating when you look at certain tribes, but there's nothing stopping us from doing that. And so when you do that, and then when I got out of debt, I stopped watching movies, all my resentment went away, and I realized that it all has to do with engagement. Like, if you don't engage in that, it doesn't matter. And also, there's a practical application for what you just described, because hoarding people, when things go south, they get got. It's like the rich guy on the hill has all his fancy pants and lollipops until there's this apocalyptic scenario, which is, it happens in nature all the time. I'm not saying it's the end of the world at all, but like when these revealings happen and when the social climate shifts and shame shifts and what people are capable of doing shifts, those are the first targets. That's why I think a lot of the masters of the universe hide in ways that I don't think we'd expect. I think some of them are like living lives that aren't opulent, like trillionaires, or the people that invented money itself. Because if people knew who they were, their identity is a liability,
Right. I think some of the people you're describing, I think you're correct, but I also think that those people are pwned. And pwned to the point where if a hero emerged that got them out of what they're engaged in, they would be thankful at a level that is probably unmeasurable.
100%.
To get back to it, greed is basically like a sickness. Yeah. I have seen so many people that have made it to wealthy, and then that became the whole drive of their whole life at the expense of their families, their marriages, and everything else. And the sad part is some of the people I've known couldn't spend that much. I mean, they're multi-millionaires. They will never want for a thing, and yet every day back to the cubicle, back to the salt mine, squeezing, pinching. Oh, where can I save money? Can I screw that person over on ship? It's literally becomes a disease. And that's easy to combat. Like for me, I don't even measure it within my tribe. If I meet a legitimate person and I know that I can help, I don't give a damn if they're not even my friend.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, and then it's like I'm almost the opposite now. Like me and Amy were talking about building a house potentially if we go for a fourth kid or want our parents to live with us. And I'm like, I would feel almost a sense of shame to not live in a barn at this point. Like I'm like, I don't want my friends to think I'm a loser. And also, like, I think what you just described is also similar to getting overweight. Like I've been losing weight lately and trying to lose weight because my body almost was hoarding some fat as like a protection. And I think some people do that with money, where it's like childhood fears. Because I know that feeling of wanting money so that the bad man won't get you, and you don't. And then you grow up and you can't even realize who the bad man is. You know that was in a movie, and it was depicted really well. It was that golf movie with Will Smith, or was it that, or was it The Greatest Game or something? But anyway, it was a golfer, and it was man versus self was the conflict. If I was writing the screenplay, and he had to get everything out of his head except for that ball, and everything disappeared. But the one thing that kept coming back was the memory of the banks taking his father's house when he was a child, and that fear of like, we're gonna get you again, is what makes people hoard. And when you hoard, it's just like becoming obese. It's like a spiritual obesity, where it actually becomes your cancer. Whereas if you have resources and you use it to build your community, that's when people have your back when you're in trouble, and you actually have a currency that can't be regulated by the most evil people in the world.
When I was young, and we used to come summers to Rhode Island, where I live now, you never saw hoarding. You never saw it. And even the wealthy people, there were a few of our friends that all the kids hung out, but their parents were wealthier than like my dad. He was a school teacher. But they didn't have a bunch of crap. They had a nice car, or they might have something nice in their car, but there was not all this accumulation that we see now. And matter of fact, even in people without a lot of money now, you see this accumulation. And think of it in terms of electronic devices even. Back in the 70s, your electronic devices consisted of probably a plug-in clock, a television. You might have been fancy and had an automatic can opener, but you're already getting to the end. There wasn't that much stuff prior to even the answering machine. But since the answering machine came, it just became every couple years another thing you needed to plug in.
And
now look at us.
That's why it's called possessions. I'm really grateful that my kids' toys are pretty much all handmade by the Bears. It's like, for Walter's birthday, we wrote him a story and animated it, and my Irish friend with his beautiful reading voice read it. So he got his own story about Walter and the giant squid, and then, other bears like knit him a giant squid and make him a night outfit. Like, so there's nothing wrong with stuff. It's just, the consumption of the Chinese, mass-produced nonsense is a sickness. I think you're 100% right. And to go back, okay, I'll tell you a story this week. So I have this storage unit back where we used to live, and I lost my debit card or something, and there was a payment problem, and they were like trying to call me to pay for my storage unit, and my first instinct was like, I don't even remember what I put in there. Just fucking take it, And this is all this stuff that I was like, oh, this is really important, but I can't fit it in my garage, but I really need to keep it, so I'm going to put it in the storage unit. I can't remember one thing that's in there, and I wouldn't care if it burned. And I'm like, just take it. I don't even know what's in it. Like, what? How can I possibly have value in something I don't remember? And I think we can really boil down most of our possessions in the same way,
Hey, it's true. Look, where if you did give that up, it'll probably end up on Storage Wars or one of those things. But that tells you something too. When you look at people having a TV show to sell off somebody's things that they've lost, and then name it Storage Wars, and then almost every car show on television is death, the death idea.
Yeah.
Roadkill, the ghouls, graveyard cars. They're all, you can see just by looking at the language, it reflects exactly what you're saying. It is the disease. And they're going to take that disease and they're going to build some metastasized tumor called a TV show.
Right.
And they're going to take it as far as they can.